Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
Hello. Well, nobody else knows this because they're not here with us, but we are in a different closet today.
Holy moly.
We are in a different closet.
Let the drama unfold.
We are in my closet this time.
Yes,
so
we are.
So it has a whole different vibe to it. Let's see if I can focus in here. Okay, so I would like to, if you're okay with,
Yes.
because usually we talk, and if we go too long, we'll split it up into a few different episodes. We didn't do that this time, but I kind of feel like we could have, should have, whatever the word would be, because I wanted to finish up what I would call part three, that we kind of started in the last one. And that was talking about backups to our employees. So for anybody who's not listened to the previous episode, which was, what was that called? Or what was
we should really know that. Team hiring, like basically you having a very thorough and
hiring process, looking for candidates. Yes, thank you. And that was kind of part 2-ish. The one before that was about drama unfolding. So I'm going to encourage y'all to go back and listen to those two. I think they have a lot of good information in them. Yeah. But one thing we talked about, wanting to talk about, never got there, was backup employees. And so what does that mean? I guess, having done this for a little bit now, I think what has helped me, and you're the one who, opened my eyes to this concept, or, whatever you want to call it, of making sure that, I guess I don't want to sound paranoid. Maybe that's what I'm going to sound, is paranoid, but I guess that's part of my personality, I guess.
Is it paranoid or is it reality? I mean,
or is it being prepared?
Yeah.
Right? And so some people are better at being prepared, and then you've got the others that fly by the seat of their pants, and some of it boils down to personality, I guess, because to me, I'm not one who does well flying by the seat of my pants. I'd rather have a moment to process, to think, weigh my options. I feel like I'm more effective that way. And so I think you taught me this years ago when my office manager, who had said, I can't wait till I'm managing 3 or 4 of our offices. And I was like, huh? Like, where did that come from? I have never said I wanted more than one practice. And I said, how about we manage this one first? Like, this one's a constant, a gong show. Let me use appropriate verbiage. Constant gong show around here. And you want me to multiply this times 4? Like, that, I don't see that happening. Yeah. Let us focus and master this one. I will keep that in the back of my mind. Well, fast forward, then later the next year, perhaps, she was like, I can't manage. I can't. I'm like, WTF? Like, you're the one who wanted to manage 3 or 4. Now,
what if you would have gone with her on that?
I know. Can you imagine? So I was like, okay. And then from there went to, I can't manage anymore. And then she said, I'm going to paralegal school. Mm-hmm. And so I know I've talked about this previously, but anyway, so I'm just like, this lady is all over the place. Mm-hmm. And, honestly, part of me can't fault her. When you're in your young 20s, you stumbled backwards into the dental field. It's not what your goal was. Not like you were dreaming of being in the dental field as a child, and you've just kind of stumbled on it, life circumstances. And so you're still discovering yourself, and I can't fault you for that as a person. But as a business owner, I'm like, WTF. So, what are you doing? And more than, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Because then it created a lot of fear for me, because I was probably, year 4, year 5 of her being my office manager, and starting off as being the one front desk employee. And then as the practice grew, and then as she evolved into being the manager, and then suddenly I don't want to be the manager, I'm going to paralegal school. I think for me, that was such a roller coaster of emotion, going, oh my God, what am I going to do if she leaves? Yeah. And so I think you stepped in at the time, and that's right around when we were starting to work with you, and you created this leadership model and team captains, and we've talked about that in other episodes, so I won't rehash all of that here. But that tided her over for a little bit. She realized she didn't want to go to paralegal school, so she managed for a little bit longer. But the fear had already been planted in me. And I just kind of went, I don't want to rely on anybody. And I don't want to have to give her the moon and tippy-toe around. And I just don't want to be stuck because I rely on her so much.
Right.
And so that's when you were like, yeah, I've already been working on. I was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean you've been working on? And you're like, no, behind the scenes, like you and I had meetings, but then you would meet with my staff separately. They'd email you separately. And you were already in the back of your mind had gone, okay, if she leaves, what are the main functions of what she does? Who else can we cross-train? Who else can we, where could we parcel out her tasks? And then all the while, that's how we kept her longer too. Tasks that she didn't really want to do anymore. We figured out how to train and pass off parts of things. And really, honestly, when she stepped away last year, I mean, if I'm to be honest, I'm going to just say it. I thought it was a really dumb decision because she had everything. Like she had top pay. She had her pick and choose ideal role. She got to work from home. Like, I think because that fear was still in me of going, I don't want to lose her. Something about too, I've always admired in other practices, people who've been able to hang on to their employees, or, I started with my office manager and it's 15 years later and they're still with me. And I've always been in awe of that. And she'd been my longest term employee. And I was like, oh God, like the streak I wanted and I'm not going to have. So it just took me some time to, again, I'm the feeler. So it took me time to feel my way around that. And once I felt my way around that, then, and I finally was like, you know what, this is a reality. She's going to step away at some point. Like she's given me every indication that she's not here to stay long term. Whether that's my fault or her fault or life's fault, we could dissect all of that because I felt all of that at multiple points in our 11-year relationship together. Then the next one came right year of the pandemic was I want to go I finished massage therapy school. I'm going to be a massage therapist. So it's like she'd been giving us these signals over a few years. And if you go back to the how do you retain an employee that we did about a month ago, we were kind of doing that with her. And maybe you were being strategic about it. I wasn't. I was just kind of like, okay, how can I make this work? Could I do this? Could I do that? Like, how do I? So it did work for a while. We retained her for a while, but then it gave us time to train up other people such that when she pulled that rug from under me, finally, it was a really emotional, painful. But as far as missing a beat in the office, we didn't. And I think the staff, even members of the staff were like, oh, you must be devastated. Are you scared that she's leaving? And I was like, well, I mean, my feelings are a little hurt. Like it's, like I've watched her grow up in the dental world and we work well together. But you know what? I'm excited that she's got other opportunities that seem to meet her needs. And that was not fake. I mean, I truly do feel that way. But I said, as far as being scared, I'm not scared at all because I was like, what is she, and then this is where you don't want to like belittle what she was doing. But I was like, notice she does this, this, and this. And then she takes care of that. But the core functions of keeping us going day to day have been taken off her plate a while ago. And I think that was very powerful for the team to see that we didn't miss a beat. Like you would have thought the employee that had been there the longest for 11 years, the next longest employee has been there maybe 7 years at that time. So she had the longevity from pretty much since the practice started. And everyone would imagine that the world would crumble when she left. Dare I say, we didn't miss one beat for 1 day or 1 hour. We have been just fine. So I kept, putting my chin up going, oh, we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. And in the back of my mind going, crap, are we going to be fine or not? I don't know, but I'm going to put on this show and keep my chin up and damned if we weren't fine. And dare I say, better off. It let other people rise. We were able to change some protocols that it's like she was just so hell-bent on that protocol being the way she wanted. And it's like, we don't have to do it this way. Well, I mean, even if you think about, for 11 years, we had our front reception area with the playroom. And then we had that incident we talked about. Did we talk about it?
We did talk about it.
Yeah, on one of our podcasts last year about a kid who broke the gaming system. And we were like, okay, do we replace the gaming system? Well, let's put a coffee bar in there. I had talked about putting coffee out for so long. And it was that manager who was always like, no. We've got sedated patients. We don't want to have a temptation for them. We don't want to risk somebody getting burned. We don't want to have to clean up, pay for extra carpet cleanings, mess up furniture, like all of that, all the stuff that she was not wrong about. But now we're like, well, she's not here. Yeah. And now we have a coffee bar and it's fantastic. So, it's just things evolve and change. But was there any downside? No. And I know the key was reading the signals that she might step away. And once we had that in our minds, you sprung into action. Once I saw what you were doing, I was like, I get it. So I think that's the point of this podcast then. And I know I talked quite a bit there, but I wanted to lay the groundwork for making sure that you are constantly thinking about, and yes, it can wear you out and it can be, defeating in so many ways. But at the end of the day, I feel like that has been my saving grace every time we've had an employee leave, because I'm always thinking, any one of you could leave. Any one of you could, I hate to say it, get in an accident and not be able to come back to the office. One of you could get married and move to Hawaii. Like, anything could happen with anybody. So what is my backup plan? I think you and I have often been at, not odds, but we've been kind of had differing opinions on, as a consultant, you try to keep me very lean to make sure overhead is maximized. And I'm always paranoid going, but this person's always sick. That person calls in late. That person, I don't want to be dependent on these people. Yeah. But we are dependent on them. But I don't want to be any more so dependent on them than I have to be. So I think that has kind of worked to our advantage, that it's kind of a plug and play. You're out, good, bye. This next person comes in. Exactly. And I got to say the other last thing, and then I'll quit talking and let you get in a word here. But I will say, like, more empowering than anything was for myself. For the team to go, she's not one sweat, not one extra email, not one look of panic.
She's fine.
She's just fine. And so that to me, it's like everybody's replaceable. And it's counter to the culture of make everybody feel important and everybody has a role and everybody's important. The eyelashes are important as the femur, as important as the eyeballs, like every part of the body counts and everybody plays their role. Yes, you do. But you're all replaceable. There are prosthetics. No, I don't know.
Secretly, you're like, wah, ha, ha, ha.
Yes, but it was very empowering then. And I think it was very good for the team to see that I didn't waver and I didn't crumble and we didn't miss a beat. It was business as usual. Mm-hmm. So whether some of them took it as, you're heartless, she gave you 11 years and you haven't missed a beat, or if they went, she's just fine, I better watch myself. I don't know which way they took it, and I don't care. To me, it was very empowering for me to not miss a beat.
Well, and I think, too, it's become, because of that, I think it's become, it does sound defeating to think, we should always assume that somebody might not come back to work the next day. But I think when you think that way, it forces you to be more prepared. Like, I even think about, we've talked about the maternity lady that left, and we knew months in that, even before she knew she wasn't coming back to work, we were already planning as if she wasn't coming back to work. And what's our plan going to be to ultimately replace her? Now, she very well could have come back and our plan wasn't needed. But we would rather assume that they're not coming back. And therefore, what is our backup plan going to be? And so I think when you've got the core assumption that somebody's going to leave, a key player could get in a car wreck, when you think like that, it forces you to kind of jump into action even before action is ultimately needed. And so one of the things that I would say, and you mentioned this as you were talking about your former office manager, we really do need to have a grasp of, is there somebody on the team that I am overly reliant on? To me, that's your biggest, kink in the armor, is that to me, that's risk. If we've got too much weight on one person and all these systems live and die with that person, then ultimately your practice is at risk, because if that person leaves, gets married and goes to Hawaii, heaven forbid, dies in a car accident, your whole system went out with that person. And so we have to, if there's somebody we're overly reliant on, we need to figure out why. Like, what all do they have on their plate in great specific detail? What is not only the category of what they handle, but then how do they handle all of that? And it doesn't mean that we have to take that off the person's plate and give it to somebody else. It just means that we are actively training somebody else to know that aspect of his or her role. So, for example, I just came from a practice today that they've got a 3-person front desk team. It's a very new practice, about a year and a half old. And out of the 3-person front, their office manager has been there from pretty much the beginning, and the other person has been there 1 month, and the other person has been there 2 weeks. Not such a bad deal, except that the person who's been there a year and a half is due to have a baby in December and does not intend to return. And my question to both of the two new ladies is, what does she know that you need to know? You got at best 5 months. What's the plan? Like, we need to put together a plan now. And people are thinking, 5 months? Like, good Lord, we got plenty of time. No, you don't. No, you don't. Because that time goes so quickly. And when she's the only one that knows everything at the front, that means we have a lot to learn in a very short period of time. And most people aren't thinking, they're like, oh, we got plenty of time. No, it takes a lot of time to parcel out every single thing and make sure those people are as proficient as she is at a year and a half in, and they're going to be 5 months in and need to be as proficient, if not better, because she stepped out of the picture. So I think, to your point, we got to know, we got to always be thinking that somebody's leaving, and then what do we rely on somebody for, and how can we parcel that out and give them exposure to those tasks so that they could step in an emergency situation or in a long-term situation.
So I think there's multiple things we could talk about more with that. Number one being, so if you're a smaller office and you've got 1 assistant and 1 front, then what are you doing? Right. And so in a way that's almost easier though, because then you just cross-train them both. But what if one of them isn't an RDA and whatever? So in that case, that's where I always was like, well, then I'm going to make sure I have 2 assistants. Because that way, if somebody's out, at least in my world, somebody's always out. So at least this way, like, I don't have to cancel my day. You know what I mean? So I think looking at that, and then for anybody that's worried about, well, yes, I rely heavily on this person, but if I ask them to train somebody else, are they going to train them properly? Are they going to feel threatened? But I think it's about how you make that culture there, where it's like we all want to be helping each other. We all need to be useful somewhere else in the practice. And make sure that it doesn't come across, because that's not what they're doing. They're not taking, to your point, what you said before, it's not like anybody's taking it off your plate. It's still on your plate. We're just making sure we have a backup so that if you want to go to Hawaii next year for a week, we're not left high and dry having to shut down the office. And what I kind of tell people in that role, I'm like, you want somebody to be there to help you.
Exactly.
You by being insecure, you're actually pigeonholing yourself. And some people work that way. They want that security. But that's a culture thing you're going to have to figure out how to break. And maybe you have some tips on that.
Well, and I would say a lot of times it is fear of, well, if somebody else knows my job, then I'm less valuable to the practice. And so I think they do it out of self-preservation. But I think we approach that person in a tone that means something to them. So I have found most people, not all of them, but most people that have that mindset, they're usually pretty hard workers, and they have worked themselves into this position. They want to keep it, and they have, in their mind, they have the practice in mind. Like, they think they're the best solution for the practice, and therefore I'm keeping this. Nobody else needs to have this job, because if I parcel it out or if I'll let somebody else do it, they're going to do it wrong, and then it's going to negatively impact the practice. And I care about that. So oftentimes they have the right intention and motivation. But so I would approach most people like that in this tone. Listen, I know you've got the practice in mind, and I love that about you. I love how much, energy and time you put into protecting this practice. I have realized that we are so reliant on you that the practice is at risk. And I know you would never want to do that. I want you to be able to take a break and go on a week-long vacation and not have to think about the practice and not have us constantly interrupting you. I want, if heaven forbid something happened to you, I want this practice to be protected. And I know that's what you want too. So because of that, I need to make sure that there's some cross-training. They're not Susie's not taking this off your plate, but I need you to work with her to understand what you do and why you do it, because your mind is valuable, and I need other people to know that. So it kind of puffs that ego up, And it says, I know you're trying to protect the practice, but this is a new way you can try to protect the practice.
I think that, and I think the other thing that's worked for me, again, even though I didn't mean for it to be strategic, but that's how it's worked out, is usually with that person, I'm like, I need you to let go of some of these things because I need your help in these areas. And I'm not faking it or whatever, but it's like, oh my God, these are the things that are stressing me out. You know what? So-and-so is smart enough to handle this. I could probably offload it to her, but then I'm going to overwhelm her, but that's okay because we needed to change up her, and it keeps her fresh and keeps her interested. And I keep saying her, it could be him.
Right.
But, and I think about, too, my sister who works in corporate America. She doesn't even work in dental. But that's what happened to her recently. Like, she's with this company. She's had this one position, this very niche position, and she's kind of the expert for the entire company in this one role that she's worked very hard to become the expert in. Well, this year, or a few months ago, they sprung it on her that they're redoing divisions, and so-and-so is going to get her division, but then she's going to take over this division, and they've combined this. So it was actually kind of a promotion for her. She has been bawling about it. She bawled about it for months. I'm like, are you out of your mind? Like, what is wrong with you? But I guess that's what it was, where she was like, but it's going to be done wrong. And I've spent this whole time cultivating these relationships and these systems, and I know it better than anybody else. There's nobody else who knows this better than me. And she's like, why would they... I'm still here. Why would they give it to somebody else when clearly I'm still here? So anyway, she's now finally to a point where she's like, you know what? I'm kind of looking at my new role. I'm liking my new role. So it's like she's contributing to the company. Does she miss her other role? Does she worry about it some? Yeah, but she's still there to tap into, if somebody has a question. But she's like, you know what? I'm kind of glad that's off my plate now. I was kind of getting tedious. I kind of like this new challenge now. So,
wow.
It can be a win-win if you truly do have, and if you said you didn't have other things, then I would go, something's not right. Because there's always things like the majority of people, even office managers, don't know much about reports and interpreting the reports. Or, there's a million things you could look into that probably is on your own plate. Like that for me, I'm like, man, I've been meaning to tackle this for a while, whether it's the OSHA binder or our emergency training or our marketing plan, like whatever it may be, that I'm just like, oh, I've been waiting, I know I need to tackle this. Creating standard operating procedures for things. Who has updated that? Who's updated the policy manual? Who's, like all of these things that constantly need to be looked at. And who has the time and bandwidth for that? You do.
Yeah.
I'm putting you in charge of this and this, and I want you to teach Susie about that and that. Well, I don't want, but I'm doing, I know, but I need you at a more important task right now. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go back to Seinfeld again. I always go back to Seinfeld, but it's like George, they give Elaine the job of getting the mail, and Jerry gives Elaine, like, I'm going to be out of town, go get my mail. And George is like, what? Why does she get to get the mail? And he's like, George, you must flush the gaskets. You've got to flush the toilet. I can't have my toilet backing up. And so like he puffs up George. But truly, the toilet probably did need to be flushed, It's just like, so... you're puffing up, but at the same time, you're helping yourself.
Exactly.
So what else could you use help on tasks that you've been meaning to get to that you could parcel out?
Yeah. I think that's such a creative way to, again, you're a hard worker that's owning so many roles and responsibilities by saying, I need your expertise here. Like, I know it's hard to let that go, but I really need you here. I think that's such a creative way, because then it's not crushing them in the process, or they're not resisting giving that information to their teammate because you've put different things on their plate that is actually taking their time and attention. And I do think that if they've got the practice in mind, they may be limited in some ways in the way that they give information, but I think they're going to, over time, help that person.
Well, of course, and again, I'm not just saying this, I do mean it, but I'm like, look, you have created this amazing system. So, as a leader, we should be training up and helping somebody else gain that knowledge as well. And I need your time freed up to tackle this. I've been trying to tackle this for months, and I'm getting nowhere. And this is kind of what I envision for this, but I don't have a full vision. All I know is that the state board or the DEA or whoever it is says we need to be doing this, and I'm struggling with how to make that happen in this particular practice with this group of people. I need your thoughts on, this practice so well. Like, you tell me what you think would work here, and then I can tweak it. We can, put our heads together again. And it has worked beautifully every time. Yeah. And it's like that person, so the practice is a winner because now you've got a backup. The person who had to learn the other task is now learning and growing. That person's learning and growing and contributing in other ways. You've got stuff off your plate.
And sometimes even in the process, the person that's learning those new roles may see things a little bit differently. May have questions that are like, oh, why do we do it that way? So there's kind of layers of value in this. I think first and foremost, you're protecting your practice from being too reliant on somebody. But I think behind that, you are potentially uncovering some better ways to do things. Like you mentioned with your office manager, once she left, we felt a little bit of freedom to explore, like, do we still want to do things in this particular way? And so I do think that's beneficial as well. It kind of like your sister experiencing this new role. The person that stepped into her old role is probably making a few little tweaks and changes, and then she's got a fresh set of eyes on this new role that she's in. And again, I know we're talking as if the roles are changing. The roles don't have to change, but I think if you are putting more on one person's plate so that they will pass something off, there's going to be some benefits that happen with little tweaks and changes.
And if you decide you're going to pass nothing off, but you're just going to have them help cross-train, I think that works just as well. And like what you said, like knowing that you're helping the practice in a different way.
Yeah.
And then, so I guess where this backup idea came from, and I know I talked about it a podcast or two ago, but a colleague of mine that said, oh my gosh, my whole weekend's been ruined. I think we talked, like, say on a Sunday, and I guess on Friday his main assistant put in his 2 weeks, and I was like, okay, so what you need to do next then is try to retain blah blah blah, and then work on your backups. And he's like, what are you talking about? And that's what made me think we should talk about this, because he's right. Like, he's had his practice now 3-ish years. I didn't have this mindset at 3-ish years. It came much later, when I was super dependent on some people. And even now, like, we talk about it now, there's one in my office now that I feel like I'm very dependent on. And you and I have been talking for the last couple of months going, how do we make sure? Because again, if she steps away, I think I will feel that pinch a lot more. And I don't want to feel that way. I want that when we part ways, and I guess that's the thing, maybe I'm just going to assume with everybody now, we're all going to part ways at some point.
I think that's the safe assumption.
It is, and it makes my stomach sick just to think about it. Like, that's not the way I want it to be, but I think that is the best way to protect myself, maybe, is to go, we're all going to part ways at some point, and I want it to be on good terms. Like, yes, it made me sad that the office manager left, and I thought it was kind of a dumb decision because she went to lower pay and something that I think she thought was going to be greener, and I don't think it will be. Maybe she does, though. That's not for me to decide or me to even worry about. But to me, just sitting there going, there's so many things about this, from, like, if I was your friend or your mom or your aunt, I'd be like, what are you doing? But as far as, we parted on good terms. I wish you well. I really do wish you well. Thanks for all your service to the business. I appreciate everything you've done for us. And every now and then, if I still have a question, I'm texting her, she's texting me. So we left very amicable, and it could have easily been. We've still never talked about it. It happened last year, but I know we will at some point, but it could have easily been a very
ugly breakup.
And it wasn't. And I think because we did have a mutual respect for each other. And I think a lot of it too, where I was like, I think if I was going to be hurt more, other than emotionally, but if my business was going to be hurt by it, maybe I would have thought differently, but I knew we were going to be fine. Yeah. And so that's where I try now, again, to make sure that I've put systems in place. So another part of that, by the way, I should say, is really listening now.
Yeah.
And personalities. And I know we go back to that, but I just think it's so important. And listening. So for example, I knew something was amiss with the office manager back probably early last year. I don't know if you remember this or not, but I forwarded you an email.
Yes, I remember it clearly.
And it was an email about a continuing education class coming up in the summer, and it's one that she had said, the office manager had said for years, I would love to take this class. And so I was like, oh, here's a great opportunity. Well, I make my employees sign a contract that says if you are fired or you leave within 6 months after going to a continuing education, you'll just reimburse the practice back for your airfare and your registration, whatever. And so when I sent that to her, I was waiting for like, oh my gosh. And I get back the response of, let me think on it, because I've got some stuff coming up this summer and I don't know that that's going to, and it was just, I think
That was, I think, your first clue.
Right. But I was paying attention to that. You know what I mean? Like, I could have easily been like, oh, yeah, she's got stuff coming up this summer. But I paused and I went, I know her personality. I've been listening to what she wants. This is very weird. And then I forwarded it to you. I was like, am I being paranoid? Like, am I just being a weirdo here? And you replied back and you were like, no, that's concerning, because you listen to her and you know what she's always wanted to. So that had been maybe, January-ish? And then no other signs. In fact, we even met with her in February and she's like, nope, everything's great. Everything's whatever. Turned around in April and gave her notice. And so...
Well, the only other sign was we had done in April, I believe it was, you and I decided she had earned a raise. Like, there was a lot that she was contributing to the office. And we're like, okay, we think it's time to raise her. And so I had a conversation with her about that raise, and her reaction threw me off a little bit because, and I remember telling you, I said, I think she was really maybe stunned by the information. I don't know. I had a hard time getting a read on her. Just the way she responded wasn't like, oh my gosh, like, because it came out of the blue. We have very clear times when we usually raise people, and so this was very out of the blue, and I don't think she was anticipating it. And so I was expecting like oh my goodness, I wasn't wow, like, thank you so much. And it was like, oh my goodness, okay. And it was just like almost a very muted response. And I remember telling you after that, like, I think maybe she was just in shock is the way that I tried to interpret it. But I think as soon as, because about, a month later.
No, it was the next week.
Oh,
it was the next week.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. So then it all made sense. We were like, oh, that was the reaction. So I think to your point, listening even to subtle clues, like if something stands out to you as that was off or that didn't seem like her, don't just dismiss that. Pay attention to that. Now, in theory, you're paying attention to that, but you've already started building a backup plan. So I wouldn't say wait for the signs and then start building the backup plan. I think you should always be building backup plans. And as a side note, another aspect of the backup plan that I feel like we have in place is, and we talked about this a little bit in our previous episodes, lots and lots and lots of documentation. And so one of the things that your former office manager did, she was naturally good at documentation. She loved it. Very organized and just loved to put things down in writing. But when we knew that she was kind of on the fence, a couple years even before she finally left, we made sure that we understood her role fully, everything she did. We would ask her, I feel like every 4 or 5 months, okay, now what are you working on now? Let's break it down. I think I was a little bit panicky about that because I was like, is there something she's taken on that I need to make sure somebody else knows about? So we had lots of conversations about her role, what she was working on, how much time she was spending on certain things. So we stayed really in the loop on that, but we would continue to encourage her towards documentation. The marketing calendar, for example, like she was doing a lot of marketing and we're like, can you put this into like a plan? Like every month, this is what you're doing. That's where the marketing documentation that we use now came from, is because she put that together. And so documentation can be a form of having a safety net backup plan. So maybe you do only have one front office and one assistant and you're like, first of all, cross train. I still think even if your front is not a true certified assistant, she can still observe in the back when possible, learn what she needs to learn,
help in sterilization, seat a patient,
flip a room. Maybe she needs to work towards her RDA, even if she doesn't want to assist, just in case you've got a day where your rock star assistant is out. She could at least step back and suction or snap an x-ray if she's got a license. And so maybe we need to think about that. But even if you only have those two people, is their role fully documented? And when I say fully, I'm like, break it down like as basic as possible. To me, the best documentation is like for a chairside assistant, what does a tray setup look like? To put a picture of it there just in case somebody's a visual learner, and then label all the parts. Put a list if somebody needs a checklist of what all to put on the tray. Okay, let's include the list there. How to wipe down a room, like specifically. What do you wipe? What do you spray? And again, you're like, that is so tedious. I can't tell you. You called it standard operating procedures. I can't tell you how helpful those are. this office that I was just coming from, the front office doesn't have that. And so the lady who had been there a month and the lady who'd been there 2 weeks was like, man, the 1 month lady was like, I've already started working on a manual because I'm not going to be able to learn this without a manual. I think that's so valuable to have that and put time into that. So get your people to document their systems. I love videos. Because there's a lot of like dental training videos and all of that, but specifically to your office, to your operatory, to your sterilization room, to your front office. Like, have your person create a little quick video that's just like, by the way, this is how you log in on the front office computer. And YouTube is really great because you can actually create a private channel on YouTube where it's not public to everybody. It's just your team has access to that YouTube channel, and it could have a ton of 1, 2 minute, 30-second, I don't care what it is, but quick videos for people that can that are new to the team. Again, we kind of assume worst case scenario. Sweet Sally at the front got in a wreck and she didn't come in the next day, and she's not going to be able to come back. She's going to be in the hospital for a while. We're in like urgent hiring mode, but our assistant is having to step up to the front. Does she have a binder or even a set of videos? How do you check in a patient? Okay, let me watch the video. Okay, great. Now I can go check in a patient. We've at least got something. That is a backup plan. It's not a person, but it's still a plan. And I think that's good too.
I love that, because with all the fires we're putting out, then for us, because ultimately that's what's going to happen is they're going to turn to us and go, how do you do this? And then we're going, and so that's a bad feeling, first of all, but then you're like, oh shoot, I'm the captain of the ship and I don't even know where the key to the boat is. You know what I mean? So, a great way to really lose the confidence of your team right where they need it most. I think a couple of things you just said there that I wanted to kind of highlight. Like you said, this is one of those things that, yeah, we have the SOPs that have been created, but that they need tweaking. And let's say it's not for an emergency. Like as your practice grows or as, things change, this is where a foundation of things is nice to have. And then that way you have something to go back to rather than starting, like reinventing the wheel literally over and over again. It gives you something to go off of. So I think that being part of the backup for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. So I would say big takeaways on this, if we could summarize, is first of all, maybe a core assumption. Sounds defeating. Core assumption should be just assume that we're going to part ways. In some way, we need to prepare for people to leave. Don't build your system around people. Build systems that can ultimately transfer from person to person. Cross-train as much as possible. And if you can't cross-train, then at least at a bare minimum, build really good SOP binders, training videos.
So then how do you get started on that, I guess would be my question. Like, what would be the, so for example, would you come in and say, okay, on downtime, Mary, you handle you get the mail, you post the EOBs, and you call in the prescriptions. Mm-hmm. So what is your protocol for that? You have 2 weeks. Get me, I want a bulleted list of the things you do and the order you do it in.
Exactly.
So that would be one place to start. And again, it's again, where do we get that 25th hour of the day that we all have to spend on this? But to your point where you were saying, when you've got these tasks and all that, but it's good to know what everybody's doing. Like when we checked in with her every 4 to 5 months, part of it was to see what she was doing, but part of it was because we had new employees. And now you've got a new employee on and you're like, shoot, they're really good at this, but they're not so good at that, but they could be good at that. Can we take that off your plate, give it to her, then you take this back? Mm-hmm. So it's constant shuffling of to-do lists and tasks. And so I think that's one thing, if you can kind of make your master list and maybe twice a year, quarterly if you could, but if you don't have time for that, maybe twice a year where you're already putting it in your schedule for 2 slow days to go, okay, everybody turn in your job duty as it stands for the last month. Because it could have changed. Like with all the turnover, it could have changed. And I know for us, like with software changing and all of that, like things that you just don't even think about until it's a problem where you're going like, So how can you, and part of that is to either cross-train, to offload, to make sure that you're being, even if nobody changed, what if it's the same 5 people and you're planning on keeping the same 5 people, but has anything else changed? Has the practice grown at all? Are you seeing more patients? Did you get a new software in? Exactly. All of those things. And so the task that each 5 people are doing, does that still make sense for them to be doing those same tasks? So it's a good thing to kind of
Reevaluate.
keep fresh on it. Yes. But then the brilliance of that is that you are continually aware. You may not know everything, but at least you're more aware, which gives you more confidence and more peace in knowing if 2 of these people drove to Sonic together and didn't make it back, what am I going to do?
Mm-hmm. And I think, too, to your point, make time, right? Like, even if it's just you picking 2 days out of the year or 2 half days where y'all actually shut the office down and spend time. We're like, oh my gosh, that sounds catastrophic. To me, it's insurance. It's an insurance policy for you that you are not going to be in a real predicament if something happens.
It's more catastrophic when it happens, and then now you're having to cancel patients or do poor dentistry and getting negative reviews or not getting your insurance claims paid because you didn't do all the right steps because the person didn't know to do those steps because they didn't have an SOP.
Right.
So to me, it's like we all know that there are those days in the year that are going to be slow. So pick them.
Yeah, make the time.
Make the time.
Yeah. Good conversation.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.